Hi everyone, it's Jeanette here from the Sewing Studio. Welcome to another tutorial. Now, last time we were making the blocks for this cushion, which was the boat block and the frayed 4-patch. And today, as promised, we're going to have a look at some quilting ideas for it. Now, just as a reminder, we were using the Janet Clare Bon Voyage fabrics, which is a lovely range of sort of teals and blues and greens, and it's come out really nice on this cushion. I really like how it looks. It's always a surprise. Different fabrics always look very different. So I've started to have a go at the quilting, and I'll just talk you through what I've been doing and some of my ideas for this. Now I'm going to start here on the sea, on the ocean, and on this original cushion. Let me just show you. I did this wavy line, and this was an embroidery stitch that was on my machine. But I was thinking, if people don't actually have that sort of wavy stitch on the machine, if you've got a basic machine with just a few stitches, you might not have that. So I'm doing another version of this, of how to create it just with a straight stitch itself. So you're not relying on any sort of fancy stitches on your machine. And then the only other quilting I've done on this particular cushion is some free motion, just all in these background sort of light areas here. And that's because the sister I made this for doesn't like things sort of too fancy. She likes things a little bit plainer. So I decided not to sort of do too much quilting on it. But I'm going to be doing a little bit more quilting on this one, just to show you some other ideas. So we're going to start doing the wavy line stitch. And this is, if you haven't got that wavy stitch on your machine, I've just hand drawn these in and I've just followed them through with a straight stitch. So you can sort of see there, and there's another one there. And what I did, I took the inspiration from this fabric here, which had a bit of a wave in it. So let's recreate that on this block here. Now, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the marking tools I use. Now, I use a friction pen on the reverse of fabrics, but I never use a friction pen when I'm marking out my quilting lines. I prefer either these sort of chalk, and it's got a loose powdered chalk in there, and it's just got a little wheel, and if I sort of hold that there, we can probably get a close-up. We've just got a little chalk wheel, a little wheel that just puts a little line of chalk down. So I like that, particularly on dark fabric, or my other favourite is the water-soluble pen, because both of those either sort of brush away or wash out really easily. And then I don't have any concerns about anything sort of left in the fabric after I've finished with it. So all I'm going to do, I'm going to try to keep this in shot, is I'm actually going to just take my chalk liner and just carry on this line, and I'm just sort of recreating a bit of a curve so you can sort of see what I've done there. Now that's in the next block, so I'm just going to finish at that seam there, and then I'm going to go this way and just carry on. So I've just created my own gentle curve, and then once I've got one in, I can just sort of follow. And I'm just going to go through that one. Now these are a rough guide of where I'm going to quilt. I'm not going to worry too much if I stray a little bit off it. And I'm going to do the same again on here. Just gone over that again. So there you can see the rough lines that I've drawn, and I'm just going to take that to the machine and do a straight stitch on that. Okay, so you can see I've got this under the machine here now, and you can see the chalk lines that we've drawn, and I'm just going to start off in the wadding or batting. Now I will just point out, if I turn that over, there's no fabric on the back. I've got no backing on this. I'm just quilting the top to the wadding. When I come to put this into the cushion, I will add a lining piece of fabric at that point. But you could have a backing fabric on that if you preferred. So I've got a blue thread in here that matches my fabrics. I've got a straight stitch, and my stitch length is at a 3.0, and I'm just going to follow . Now, when you come to the end here, just slow down. You might just need to just hand turn that last stitch, because we want to finish, and I think I will, we want to finish as close in that seam as we can. So I'm just going to check where that's landing. And I'm happy with that. So now I'm just going to actually lift the foot. And I'm just going to travel down that seam until I reach my second chalk line. And then we're going to come back the other way. So you can see there. Now when I was sewing that, I was just concentrating on keeping it nice and smooth rather than landing exactly on that chalk line. So I'm just going to come in again. Let's just tuck that out of the way. Yep. Just checking where I landed on that seam. And then I'm just going to come down that seam. And come back the other way again. So let's have a little look at the quilting that I've done here in the sails, and you can just see I've just done a straight stitch with a little bit of a sort of curved triangle shape. And the reason I did that is because I wanted to look a little bit like the wind had caught the sails, but you could just as easily just do a straight line. You don't have to put the curve in. But how I did it, I used my water soluble pen, and I'm just going to draw, just freehand, sort of a shape that looks a bit like that, and then bring it down. So I'm sort of going from corner to corner, and then I'm going to draw another one in like that. So that's the shape we're going for. So we're going to get this under the machine, and I'm just going to hold on to that, the top thread. And you can see I'm a little bit wonky there. It doesn't matter. It's just a guideline for me. It's just a visual of where to sew. If you want to make yourself a little template, you absolutely can, but that's absolutely fine for me. I'm just going to bring up the bobbin thread. Now I'm doing that because we're starting in the centre, in sort of a landlocked area, and I don't want that bobbin thread to be sort of tangling up underneath, so I'm just going to bring it up to the top. And you'll see as well I've put a matching thread. This is actually, it looks a bit cream there, but it's actually very light green. And once again I'm just sort of using the centre of the foot there, and I'm just going to follow that drawn line. I'm still at a stitch length of 3.0, and just go gently. It's not too steep a curve. And I've got to the top there. So I'm going to lift the foot. Now once again, I'm just going to get as close to that seam as I can, because I can now travel along that seam until I can see my markings. And when I get to the end, I'm going to stop. I'm not going to use the scissor function on here. I'm just going to raise the foot, raise the needle, pull this out, and cut a length of thread. And there it is, all stitched. So just a damp cloth or a little spritz of water will get rid of the water-soluble pen there. And these threads, let me just show you what I do with those while we're here actually, very quickly. So I'm just going to trim that one down a little bit. Now, this, if you had a backing on this, you would bury the threads. I have got the option where I could just take these threads through to the back, but I'll show you. I'm just going to put a couple of Let's do 3. Just to knock that off, and then, I don't know where I've knocked it, but there's a needle in here. Now you can get the self-threading needles, which have got like a little gap in the top, and these are really good for this, because you don't have to be threading a needle, but this is one with a nice big eye, so we should be all right. So I'm just going to take one of the strands there. I'm going to go into the hole where that thread's come out, and I'm just travelling between the wadding and the fabric. You can see I've not gone through to the back. So if you were doing this on a quilt and it had a backing on it, basically that takes the thread and you just give it a little bit of a pull, and sometimes you hear a little bit of a pop, and they call that popping the knot. And then that buries that thread in between your layers, and it's made it disappear, and it's all nice and neat, and it's all nice and secure. Okay, so that's the sails done. So the next bit we're going to do is these squares. So if I just hold that so you can get a nice little close-up, you can see here I've done this orange peel effect on the squares. And how I've done that is I've made myself a little template out of template plastic. And I just cut a 2-inch square because that's the finished size of those squares. And then I just found something with a nice gentle curve, marked it with a Sharpie, and then I've just scissor cut. So you've got this little shape here. And what I can do is I can now use that on here, and you can see I can just place that on the square. These points should come out corner to corner, and I can just draw with my water-soluble pen again. And then all I do is just move that template around. So you don't always need expensive tools, you can make your own. And I came up with this little idea during lockdown when, of course, we didn't have access to everything, so I just had to make do with what I had at home, and luckily I had some template plastic. Now let me just show you, excuse me, how to do that on a corner one, because here we've got to allow for our 1/4 inch seam. So for this one, I'm going to start with that corner, because when we place it, you can see there that it's given us where our 1/4 inch will be. And the same if I do that there and mark it from that corner there. It will take into account where our 1/4 inch seam will be, and you'll still see that quilting. So let me just finish marking that one. So that very simple little template works really well. Now just to say as well on this, I'm using thread colours that match the fabric. So that's got a light green on it, and on these teal ones, if I just bring this down to here, you can see I've used a teal thread. And you can see there where I've marked previously and stitched. You can sort of see that on the cream there. That's a sort of teal coloured thread to match in with that. So we're going to take that to the sewing machine now and sew that green one, because we've still got our light green thread in from doing the sail. So let's just take that, and I'll just show you how to sew that one. So once again, because I'm starting in sort of a landlocked area, wrong button, I'm going to lift up that bobbin thread and just make sure it's not getting tangled on the back. And this one we really do want to just take nice and slowly. It's not too steep a curve. Now once again, if you need to just hand turn that. So I'm just making sure I land right in that corner. And the trick to getting a nice smooth curve is to try to keep sewing. And you'll see as I'm moving, I'm sort of moving the fabric like this as I'm going round. The less we try to adjust, the better. And once again, we're going to lift up our foot and our needle. I'm going to cut a length of thread so that we can tie it off and bury the thread again. And there's that one all sewn. Okay, so we're now going to look at the final bit of quilting that I've done on this, which is the free motion. Now this is a little bit scary because this is still a fairly new machine to me, so I'm still getting used to how it works basically. And what I've been given to have a go at is the Bernina Stitch Regulator. And the whole idea of this is it helps keep your free motion stitches nice and even. And I've only had a couple of practices on it, but it seemed to go well. So we're going to be very brave. I'm going to try it on camera and see how we get on. Now, the first thing to say is when I'm free motioning, I do wear gloves. And I've also put a slider mat onto the machine. And both of those things, the slider mat just helps me to keep everything moving. There's not quite so much friction happening on the bottom. And the gloves just give me a bit more grip, gives me a bit more control of my fabric. I have tried the free motioning in a hoop. I don't get on with that quite so well. So gloves and the slider tends to work quite well for me. So let's take this to the machine and give the stitch regulator a go. I'm just going to put this, now I'm going to make it a little bit easy on myself to begin with, and we're just going to come in one of these outside areas. Let's just put that there. Let's put my gloves on. And I definitely do find the gloves helpful. You can do it without gloves, but I feel I've got far more control with them. Now, even though I'm starting on the outside, I'm still going to drop my foot and bring up my bottom thread. It's a good habit to get into. This is where wearing your gloves, you haven't got, there we are. You lose a bit of the feel, but sometimes at home I'm gloves on, gloves off, gloves on, gloves off. But anyway, so here we are, let's give this a go. I'm going to start with my needle down. Now the stitch regulator, the whole idea is that it senses if you're not moving the fabric, and this is because I'm used to free motioning without a sensor on it. My inclination is if this tends to stop or stop moving, I put my foot on the pedal and go a bit faster. But actually what I've got to do is not to do that and remember to move the fabric. So I've chosen a point which I'm just going to come in at, and all I'm going to do is just sew. And that's actually working really well. Now, just to note, don't feel you have to do all of the area in one motion. If you need to stop, remember to breathe, and try to keep your shoulders nice and loose. It's quite often, sometimes you find you're holding your breath, you're going along, and you're holding your breath without really noticing it, and you hold tension in your body because it's a little bit scary. But we're going to come in again. And there it is done. Now what I really like is it really does give you a nice even tension, which actually if I'm home just practicing without this, I sometimes have to do a bit more of a warm-up before I get that good. So it has really helped. I do really like it, but it was that thing of just making sure, let me just bring this out here, show you with my fancy gloves on, look, and show you that stitching. Now all I was doing when I was stitching that was just sort of looking where I wanted to go, and in my mind just keeping sort of these sort of loops. You've just got to sort of think that sort of motion when you're doing it to get sort of nice smooth loops. But it is practice. It really is just hours of practice. Now should we just try in one of these landlocked areas, and I'll show you what we do in those. So I'm going to try this area here under the boat. So I'm actually going to start once again as close to a seam as I can. And this is where you definitely need to bring your bobbin thread up. You don't want that. Oh, can I grab it with my gloves on? No. If I had a pair of tweezers, I'd probably be all right, but there we are. So I'm starting right in that corner. Now, if it helps, you can sort of trace out where you think you might want to go with your finger before you go there. But like I say, there's no sort of dark art to this really. It really is just practice. Now, this is where I've got to remember, keep the fabric moving. Keep the fabric moving. So let's see how we go. And I've aimed for another seam there to finish. So you can see we started over there and we've come all the way round. And once again, as we did before, we're going to lift our foot, take my gloves off, and leave ourselves a nice tail of thread that we can tie off and bury into our work. So that stitch regulator really does work well. Once you get used to, you've got to keep the fabric moving, and it's not actually the pedal that controls it. And that's the, let's put it under the close-up if we can, and that's the stitching we've just done there. So that's free motioning with the stitch regulator on the Bernina, which I absolutely love. So I'm going to finish this off, and then next we'll be looking at doing the lapped zip in the back. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you'll give some of these quilting techniques a try. If you do, please post any photos of your makes up onto any of our social media platforms. We really love to see what you do with some of these ideas. Okay, until next time, I hope you'll join me again in the sewing studio.